to the February meeting of C2E2. An open public meeting. We'll go around and introduce ourselves. The meeting is being recorded. After introductions, people have the opportunity to offer a public comment. But after the public comment period is over, Commissioner can speak as a general rule. So, hey, Lisa, how are you? Nobody has to sit that far away. Soon I'm going to make everybody bunch, but you can start out there. Anyway, welcome. And let's go around and do introductions. I'm Cindy Lewin. I'm the chair of C2E2.
Lisa Marcellus, commissioner. Kate Bezelon, some guest from the public.
Scott Bordeaux, I'm commissioner.
David Friedman, member.
Greg Dumas, member of the public. Rob Sandoli, commissioner.
Andrew Perillo, commissioner.
Jenna Peabody, DES.
Yeah, I want to hear about that, but we'll get to it.
Steve Burr, county staff air team.
Great. Well, welcome everybody, and let's go to the phone. I see Joan. You can introduce yourself. Yeah,
Joan McIntyre, member of the public.
great. Lauren.
Hi, everybody. I'm Lauren Breyer with Arlington Transit. I'm here to support Paul Mounier, who should be on right now.
Oh, great, wonderful. And Owen.
Hi, I'm just a member of the public, just interested in work with the committee.
Great. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Doug, just introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Doug Snowinboss. I'm a member of the commission for about 3 or 4 years now. Thank you.
And Leslie.
Hi, good evening. I'm Leslie Gray. I'm just a member of the community interested in listening.
Great. Well, welcome. And Paul, I know you're one of our speakers, so you can introduce yourself more later, but for now, welcome.
Good evening. My name is Paul Mounier. I'm the service planner for the ARPA system. I'm here to talk about microtransit later.
Yes, we're very excited to hear about that. Okay, are there any public comments? Any of our members of the public who are in the room or on the phone? Okay, hearing none, let's get started with our first speaker. So Steve, for those who have the agenda, we're expecting Emily and Nick Emily being your team and Nick being from the zoning team. But you're going to wear both hats, I understand.
I'm going to try to wear both hats. Yeah. Emily was, Emily, I wasn't feeling well, so I'm pinch-hitting for her, and I believe Nick. So
Yes, there are several other meetings in the building.
So y'all got me, and hopefully I can do it justice and answer any questions and go through this. The plan is to go through this in about like 10 or 15 minutes and leave plenty of time for questions at the end. So with that, so this is here talking about the EV zoning study, and so if there's zoning amendment changes, the zoning study is the process to make that happen. And so that's so this is an overview. On the next slide, we have the agenda. So I'm just going to roll through the policy drivers and a lot of community questions that we've got, largely around EV installations and sort of some barriers that folks have encountered with installing EVs, EV chargers. Also dive into just a bit of background related to the EV chargers, EV just data from the county with registrants and some pretty interesting findings from that perspective, and then rolling into some of the current barriers that we've identified, and then some proposed conceptual changes. So the conversation today is just sort of conceptual, like this is the issue that we've identified or the barrier that we've identified, and at a conceptual level, here's what we're trying to solve for, and then the specific zoning language is currently being developed from that. So that's sort of like the level of sort of specificity we're going to dive into, and then next steps related to the zoning study process. So with that, I'll dive into the first item, and so this hopefully is not a new piece for anyone, but just really leading into the CEP and the goal of more people with fewer greenhouse gas emissions, as well as the community, the CNTMP, the Carbon Neutral Transportation Master Plan, and some of the action program items for that. And so supporting, EV options throughout the county, and really working through that and sort of operationalizing some of those things.
It's from the CNTP.
It's, yep, from,
Get language like this into the master transportation plan that's being developed now. Are you?
yeah, so myself, yeah. Yeah, so that's, so right now it's at the strategy development and we, and then looking at the other, sort of the plans like the CNTMP that, that should be. So yeah, definitely top of mind for that.
Okay.
And then in addition to coupling with those sort of policy drivers on the next slide, just examples that we've seen in real life, both from residents as well on a couple different fronts. And so this is Central Library, and the red marks that you can see there are internal combustion vehicles that are in a EV parking spot. And so some of the zoning updates that we're proposing will help with that. As well as another example from a particular multifamily garden style apartments with the setbacks. And so the green line is the property line, and then the two lines are from the current zoning, sort of the distance that you would need to install an EV charger based on the current interpretation. And so just two examples that we've seen. There's been other examples too, but just really trying to hone in on what we've heard from the community where there are opportunities to really, to really dive in it and make some improvements, and really just trying to reduce barriers. And just a couple other drivers too. I think that, one thing that we're really trying to think through is sort of this like multiplier effect, and sort of how can we do something that can have community investment and really have spark that sort of additional sort of climate benefit. And also like what is kind of in the local control with all of the things that are happening at the federal level, what is, with EV tax credits and things like that, this is something, that we can take on at the local level and reduce those barriers. And so just trying to work through that as well.
I'm just looking at your captioned vehicles, and I know you didn't do this slide, but vehicles not plugged in. But these are internal combustion vehicles. This is not a complaint about EVs parking in EV spots, but not charging. This is actual non-EVs. It's a problem that you're working on.
I think it may be, yeah. And so I think for this, it might be, but yeah, we'll, the goal and intent is to have the ability to have the spots reserved for actively charging EVs. So, and there's,
But could you just, what are the setback requirements, the 15, 25 feet, was that referred to?
yeah, it's 25 feet from the property line or 50 feet from the center line of the road. And so those are the two potential options for a setback of, because an EV charger is currently a structure, interpreted as a structure in the zoning code. And so we're have proposal to reduce that, to have the ability to, just demonstrating with the configuration that doesn't.
So is that the same as a park mobile lot meter that have to go buy a ticket from it? I mean, the structure is about the same size, but those sit on the curb with no problem.
Through our research, we found a lot of examples that are similar to some, the recommendation that there is, I think benches or walls or fences that, that were like here are examples that, are more similar to an EV charger than a structure. So
I'm just curious, is there a policy around ticketing at EV only spots?
So, So there is a discussion about enforcement and how the zoning will allow for clearer signage and then clearer and more consistent.
But yes, that has been a very frequent topic of
Yeah.
conversation at this meeting.
I'm not shocked.
I know you
Yeah.
are newish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and it's a classic problem. I mean, across traffic issues, people see most traffic laws and such as suggestions rather than it's a problem.
Yep. Yeah, and definitely the enforcement piece was top of mind as we're doing this, as we're endeavoring to do this. So in the next slide, just some level setting. I think this is probably information that most folks sort of know and have, but just really EV adoption is growing. You can see that the nationwide, the best data we have ended at 24, but anticipating the increase there. And then we have about every 6 months, we try to get some Arlington sort of revenue commissioner data to really look at both plug-in hybrids. So this is just, the yellow is just plug-in hybrids, not sort of conventional hybrids, and then sort of 100% electric vehicles. And so as you can see, there's been that increase to support, the need of EV adoption in the county.
You measure that in percentage, I'm sorry to interrupt, but did you measure that in percentage of total vehicles in Arlington?
I believe we do have it as a percentage of vehicles, and I believe it's around like 3 or 4%. It's leading the state and national average, but we do have that metric.
I think, yeah, we have it for 2023, so be 2.7.
Those are absolute numbers, right? Right. That was where the percentage of increase in number of cars. If you, I was looking at. Okay, so we've seen a nice increase in EVs and hybrids, which may necessitate some recalculation on the percentage of dedicated spaces within the county, and maybe we'd have to be aggressive in the balancing of that if that growth chart is significant over time. But
Right.
But it's at least a better context.
Yeah, but that's a great point that the total's only 3 or 4% of all the cars.
Yeah, and then we're definitely tracking that, and we're excited to get the last sort of 6 months of data, because unfortunately, because of the tax credit sunsetting, we're expecting a pretty significant increase, and hopefully after that, not wrapping off, but definitely have the process to get the data and communicate out to more.
And just to sort of another follow on to that, do you have a way to track like maybe percentage of cars purchased every year, the amount of EVs that would, because I would imagine that percent would also be growing. Yes, yeah.
Nationally, or
Oh, sorry, for Arlington County. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, so that would be reflected in the data that I showed from the Commissioner of Revenue, who would have the type, make, model.
Okay.
And this was an interesting finding that we've also looked at with and just really trying to look at on one side is sort of the multifamily versus single family in Arlington, and then also the EV registrations by household with single family versus multifamily. And there's a ton of drivers for this correlation, not causation, but we just found this really striking and really wanted to say, hey, we really want to have opportunity to support multifamily EVs, and that's sort of what the data is showing, almost this, this reverse of sort of what the housing types are versus the EV registrations.
And we talked last month about the fact that the used EV, the prices are going in like half, and that was the pickup from people who are living in affordable housing or family is really increasing. So that is really interesting.
Yeah, it was great that we were able to sort of pull together a couple data sets and really kind of and it'll be interesting to watch that. Used EV. I think most folks are really familiar with this, but really this study is looking at level 2 charging, and that's what we're really dialing into. A level 3 charger that is not the principal use, but sort of an accessory use would could also be part of this. But as far as like primary use of EV, that's sort of out of scope from this, and we're anticipating that 95% of the chargers are currently level 2 and sort of from this board. And just level setting again, just wanted to share sort of the cross-functional nature that the team is taking for this. And so, as I noted, Emily is leading this from the AIR team and DES, and then Nick Rogers from the planning team, and then the sort of zoning division, planning, inspection services that are supporting transportation engineering and operation, AIR team, and then the other sort of county contributors. Obviously the county attorney's office, the police enforcement, and so this was a really sort of important piece tying through these changes to enforcement and how is enforcement happening now, how will this zoning sort of these zoning updates will impact that, and then DES facilities borough that has the wealth of knowledge from on-site county installations that team did. So
Quick added question, who within this group ultimately approves when something is installed? who's the final sign off? Is the final sign off on this chart?
Final sign off from like a permitting perspective or like, or?
Yeah, from a permit, well, if it's in the public space, whatever is required there, but if it's in the private space, yeah, I would assume it's permitting.
Yeah, it would be the permit team and sort of inspection services, would sort of be the team that would sort of like, make sure it's conforming with zoning, sort of the, the building codes and permitting and, for private. Right of way, we're in the beginning of sort of researching what that could be, and that's a different team, and you can, probably anticipate with all of the sort of different pieces of sort of competing uses for the right of way and then teams that work in that space. So here, just really the current interpretations and some of the barriers that we're seeing. And so there's really three big barriers. And then the rest of the presentation is sort of structured in each of these issues, sort of drilling down, talking about the issue and then showing some visuals on this. So the first one is that EV parking does not reduce the total number of parking spaces. So right now in the zoning code, you can take a spot and say this is for EV parking only. However, you cannot take that spot and say this is for EV charging only and have it count towards the parking. And so with that interpretation, a lot of the either site plan properties or with a parking performance plan or just by right, that gets into like the parking minimum issue, where now if you sign it as EV charging only, that could take you out of conformance with the minimum there. And so that's a current barrier that that exists today that this work is looking to.
That's interesting. I did a project where took 4 spaces out of an existing parking garage that was tight to the zoning requirement and made them EV only. And we did not have a problem with it.
Was it EV parking only or EV
Charging, yeah. So, I mean, other than overnight, if no one was in the building, it was a dedicated space for EV.
And so the distinction
And
is
it went through zoning in the county.
if it was the and then this might be an interesting point to drill down a little bit and maybe offline, but yeah, and so it's sort of our current interpretation where if it was zoned to EV parking only and signed as such, that's fine and okay. But if it's like the EV charging, like you have to be plugged in and actively charging, then it would not.
I do not. It's a good fine point. I don't remember.
Yep. So that's
said. Yeah. But the intent was park here while you're charging. When you're not charging, you leave.
Yeah.
Let the next person come charge.
Yeah,
developers can game the system and just say, this is an EV parking spot that happens to have a charger in front of it if you choose to use it, and that's a parking spot.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of, or the piece where it's like looking at sort of like sort of investment models and like trying to boost utilization rates. Like if there's a non-charging EV or, and there, that there's also that, that issue from that sort of like business model of sort of third party providers.
One other way, I'm wondering if they're already getting around this in the apartment where I am, you have the option of either a general spot or a reserve spot. And to have an EV charging spot, you have to have a reserve spot that also happens to have a charger on it. So I think and I don't think they're labeled EV charging only. They're just reserve spots that have EV chargers.
And I think that's another layer of nuance that we've discovered too, whether it's sort of open parking or, your assigned spot. That's
you pay more for a reserve spot in your building.
Which is why I don't take advantage of it, because it ends up being ridiculously expensive. But yeah, that's how you can do it. One way you can do it, especially if you charge regional prices.
All right, then and we'll drill down to this issue and we have some pictures. The next issue is that EV chargers cannot currently be crouched into the current parking space dimensions, and so talking through some of that and some of the solves that we think will make EV charging a little bit easier if we had some updates to that. And the last one is that, as I mentioned, that EV chargers are currently structures and therefore not allowed to be in the required setbacks. And so those are sort of the three three big issues that we're looking to go.
Also just check out time.
Okay, I'll hustle along. So, and so as I noticed, when we talked to this.
So if I ask questions.
No, that all sounds good. Yeah, and so the first one, the EV parking only will, EV charging only distinction will count. We're allowed, we're seeking to allow a portion of space to be converted from standard to compact to allow, to accommodate EVSC in the space. And then the last one is EV chargers allowed to either add or up to 2 feet. So these are the sort of the conceptual changes that we're looking at. So I think we've talked about this one a bit, but just wanted to sort of note this again. Get up to the next slide. And some of the signage, you can see some inconsistencies with, EV parking only, if not charging only, just some paint. And these are, sort of we're using the county examples to show this. And really, if we, if this update is made, it can be EV charging, actively charging. And so we can sign it accordingly and then also help with enforcement. On the next slide is an example of a sort of the MUTCD, which is like the standardization of signage that we would look to do, as well as adopt a code of Virginia that would allow for enforcement of this and a penalty up to $25. And so this would really help with enforcement, both for county facilities as well as for folks who are doing this on their project developments. And so that really is, again, helping with the utilization rate and making these spots really more sort of for that active charging and the associated enforcement there. Another piece that we've sort of talked through a lot is the enforcement. Sometimes there's a vehicle that might be a plug-in hybrid, or an internal combustion. And so if it's actively charging, that can help the enforcement team really see it. Are you actively plugging it in? Like, there may be some bad actors who, but in general, that's a way to like really help with that enforcement piece, to really visually see what's charging there to help. So moving down to the next, and so this one is the other is the conversion of a not having encroachment into a space, and then using the current compact space to help support that. So on the next slide, we actually have sketched out some of the dimensions of what we're sort of seeking to do here. And so it's a standard parking spot, and there's different like angled parking configurations, but we're going to stick with the 90 degree parking angle. And so right there is you can see the width is reduced a bit, as well as the length. And so here's the scenario that we're imagining. If you have this row of charging that's either against the wall, against the sidewalk or something, it can't encroach into any of the space beyond the parking spot. On the next slide, we have an example of what we're trying to do to allow this sort of non-contiguous compact spot to accommodate the EV charging on adjacent pieces. We've also done some analysis on what are the common EVs in Arlington, and would the length of those vehicles exceed that compact spaces, and about half of the vehicles are at or below that 15 feet or right around it. So we don't perceive that being an issue with sort of the spot that's been converted, and then having the ability to have the charging installed that doesn't have an issue with the current dimension requirements. And then on the next slide is another example of this just operationalized in a parallel parking scenario as well.
Is that based on the average of a level 2 charging station? I mean, 3 feet is pretty substantial. I think level 2 chargers can hang on a wall and project about 8 inches out.
So I think the intent behind this was to have, currently there are compact spaces in the zoning codes. It's just using that current and saying, hey, within that 3 feet, you can get into, the space that you need. So that was the intent for that. And yeah, we confident that can, have the bollards and placement and like, and another opportunity for this is helping with accessibility. If there needs to be a reduced space for an accessible spot, having the ability to do that. Currently, EV chargers can that meet the EPA requirements cannot serve as EV chargers, and so this would help the ability to put in with that and allow for existing parking lots to reduce one parking spot to the annex of EV chargers to conform with the. And then lastly, diving into the charging and setbacks. And so as we talked about, chargers are currently structures not allowed in the required setback, and we're and our conceptual goal now is for EV chargers allowed up to 2 feet from the property line. So on the next slide, here's an example again that we showed earlier, and this is really the 50 feet from the center line and 25 feet. So real life example, that we have, and so we think that this would be really a beneficial change and really help support EV chargers, particularly in this style of current style apartment, which we know is common. On the next slide are some examples and some of the rationale that we've talked about. And in the example we just showed, it's the only convenient or sort of cost-effective way to install charging. And there's also precedents like the Park Mobile kiosk, that was mentioned, but some other examples that are in the that don't have the setback requirements that could be interpreted as relatively similar to charging. And then with that, just to recap, these are the 3 issues that we're really looking to solve through this study and make these impacts. We think that these can be significant to help reduce barriers, reduce costs. And so with that, on the next slide is our overview and what we're planning to do. So as I mentioned, these are the conceptual and sort of outcomes that we're looking to have. We're still currently language with that cross-functional team. We are presenting this to committees and commissions. So started with you all today, and the Transportation Commission, Zoning Ordinance Committee, the NAOP Government Relations Subcommittee, and then aiming for board approval. There'll be an RTA first, and then an approval thereafter. And then after that, we're really focusing on education, sort of sharing these updates and sort of how barriers are reduced, and then also looking at other sort of more forward-looking pieces, including more on the right of way or curbside charging or something on that, and sort of our EV on our EV. And then on the next slide, it's just we currently have this on the zoning study webpage. So if there's feedback, the materials from the board report are up there, as well as the timeline, and an example of sort of what we're endeavoring to update. And so that's also currently up there for feedback form as well. So
That's great.
No, wait, that's Jen.
Right. As EVs are becoming more popular, does the county have any guidance on the disposal or recycling of the EV batteries, whether it's from cars or e-bikes or e-scooters?
that's a great question. I haven't.
You're considering it.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah.
Probably typically be done through the manufacturer of the car. You don't just take them out of the car and somewhere. They would recycle them because you can replace them.
Well, I know it's a big problem at the state level, so I was curious how the county is handling it.
Great. Rob, Scott.
Sure. So you went from the kind of stakeholder outreach straight to the county board decision. So just following up on David's question from before, who is it? DES or is it planning? Who takes it to the county board? And is there a consensus process around, hey, we decided on this 2 feet for the, to solve these 3 issues here. Here's what we came up with through our working group. And then does it have to go through all the various matter change before it goes to the board?
Yeah, it'll do that internal concurrence process and work through that sort of working group team that that we have on the final recommendation, and then that'll be sort of memorialized in the board report and sort of on sort of posted to the feedback form and sort of that specific language to have those on. So that's
the air team is the lead though.
Yeah, so we're working closely. Emily's been the lead from the air team, and obviously working closely with the like CPHD, who does who knows the process for the zoning studies and zoning updates. And so yeah, so trying to sort of get sort of everyone sort of aligned, because does touch a lot of departments. So
Great, thank you.
Okay, Scott, you get the last question. David, all right, David, you get the last question. Scott.
In developing the recommendations, did you benchmark best practices at a national level or international level where there are good examples of how this is done and how it's integrated or into public infrastructure?
yeah, we certainly looked at, did a lot of benchmarking on sort of what regional jurisdictions are doing, and mostly national best practices are in this space. And so, you know, particularly for the zoning work, some of the more like right of way stuff is, you know, looking more in the international space.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated, but people are solving it. So are any of those benchmark referenced on the website? Meaning like we can see the examples that you think are the best practice?
I don't think we got to the level of specificity in the report now of like here the you know, like the specific best practices that we've seen. But that would be to look at, you know, how best to communicate and integrate that.
I just have some timeline and process questions, many of which are probably because I'm a newbie. But it looks like the rough schedule would be this to go to the board, county board around May. Cindy, first question for you, is this the kind of thing where we would then be in a position to write a letter somewhere along the lines?
We could write a letter. Do we think this is going to be controversial? If we don't always, we could write a short letter saying it's great. Or if we don't think it looks great, we could say 2 feet should be 3 feet or whatever.
Okay, and then I guess the other question is, once it's in place, how long before it becomes active? Like, is there a 6-month, 12-month? What's the timeline before this would?
I believe we would have an effective date, and in the board report for the board to consider, and I don't see any like really compelling reason to have, you know, sort of like a transition. So I think the recommendation would be closely, you know, if not upon adoption.
Thank you.
Very much for covering for both speakers.
Absolutely.
Really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all for the time on this. And yeah, if you have any other
Yeah,
questions, reach out. Let me know.
exciting.
Yes, we are. Yeah.
Okay, well, I am mindful of our time, so I wanted to introduce, so Paul and Lauren, you are on, and thank you very much for being with us. We've been excited to hear about you. So over to you. Please give yourselves a little bit more of an introduction than that.
All right, good evening. I do have a short slide deck here.
So,
Let me know. You can see this.
yep, we can see it.
Okay. So the Transit Bureau is going to be starting a microtransit pilot this spring. I know that you've come to ask me to come just to give you a brief overview of how or what to expect. So first off, the suggestion for microtransit was made during the Arlington County Transit Strategic Plan. Very general reference to it in the document, very open-ended. Identified the northern part of the county as the place to implement this. This is where we've had low ridership on fixed route. And as part of the ATSP, we recommended the north part of the county, essentially just a pretty significant restructuring and the inclusion of a microtransit area.
So microtransit being, are you going to talk about what microtransit is?
So microtransit essentially is an on-demand transit service. It's similar to Uber. You would have an app that you can schedule rides with, and it uses smaller vehicles So it isn't fixed route. There's, different models for it where you have door to door, or you can have virtual bus stops throughout the area. So there's different ways to do it, but it's essentially a on-demand, some similar to an Uber or Lyft model. So after the strategic plan, we did an implementation study. We wanted to make sure that we were evaluating all the different models and different ways of providing microtransit service, looking at the capital costs, capital and operating costs, the customer experience, the ease of implementation, scalability and flexibility, and how well it would work within the transit network. We don't anticipate microtransit being a substitute for fixed route service. We look at it as being an enhancement to provide service to places where the land use is just not favorable for running fixed route service, and to have the microtransit essentially get people to the fixed route services, the higher capacity, high frequency fixed route services. So this is what we looked at during the planning phase. And we developed this zone design. So you can see that the area that we would be talking about is two zones. The larger zone bounded on the east by Glebe Road, to the north by the county border, to the west by the county border, and to the south by Route 29 or Langston Boulevard. We also have a second smaller zone that, after discussion, after we had gone through developing the program, we had discussions, and this Westover area has some low-income housing. They don't have very consistent fixed route service. They do have one service that goes through there that I don't believe runs on the weekends and doesn't run very frequently. There's also some nodes that are included that you can see: East Falls Church, Virginia Hospital Center, Ballston Metro Center, and Madison Community Center. The way that this will work is that you can take a trip within either of the zones, going from inside the zone to inside the zone, or you can take a trip from inside the zone to one of the nodes outside the zone, or from one of the nodes outside of the zone to someplace inside the zone. The reason for that is that if you get off at East Falls Church and you want to go to Ballston, really that isn't there's many bus routes that you could take. It's duplicative service, so we wanted to make sure that we were just using the zones and the nodes. Again, the reason this was picked is because up in this north part of the county, as I said, fixed route hasn't been super feasible up there, and this is the option to get people from that zone to the rail stations. One of the great features that we are going to have is that the fleet will have fully electric vehicles, and in particular, this vehicle is an ID Buzz. It's a Volkswagen fully electric vehicle. There will also be a Sienna, I think it's the Sienna hybrid that will be equipped with a wheelchair lift. So it'll be a wheelchair accessible vehicle so that we can provide service to people that have mobility devices. And just a quick summary of where we are. As indicated, the pilot was identified in the Arlington strategic plan. We did a study to determine the best model to use in Arlington County. This is funded through the Department of Rail and Public Transportation, DRPT. We are receiving a grant for this as a demonstration project. And the service should be starting in spring of 2026. We just awarded the contract last month, and we are working very hard and very quickly to get this up and running. The pilot is to determine the feasibility of on-demand microtransit and if it is appropriate for Arlington County. We're going to have a robust customer and community outreach and engagement program. The way the app's set up, that we can even just put on the app different rider surveys, getting feedback about how and where and things to improve the service. What is great about this is we're starting off very small. There is room for expansion. Even in the grant that we got, there is room for expansion. We do plan to expand as we get community input on how we can improve the service. And then finally, the other thing that we're going to need to analyze is the capital and operating costs and how that compares to fixed route, particularly, on a rider cost per basis. So that is just a quick rundown of where we are.
I see there was a question in the chat. I can answer to that. It says, how much will it cost to riders from Doug? Traditionally, microtransit in like a national standpoint, and I think that approach that we're thinking of is to do a fare model that's based off of double that of fixed route. Fixed route right now in Arlington Transit is $225, so we're thinking somewhere around the range of $450 a ride. That can also be flexible, like Paul brought up. A lot of different parts of this program are super modular and flexible. And after doing like a robust community engagement, seeing how it's working, we'll be able to go back and forth with both the software and the range. So we are interested in looking at fares. And then also, like fixed route, we have reduced fare programs for students, seniors, and disabled. And we have the capability of applying that as well on microtransit. And we are still sort of exploring what that might look like as well. Namely, students are free on fixed route through the iRide program, and then it might be interesting to see what that would look like. I don't think we would do free for students or some of these other population groups, but thinking about a reduced fare as well.
That's great. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I understand that it does sound like an aggressive fare to have, but the one thing we want to do is make sure that we're not overwhelming the service, and as noted, we can adjust that very easily. Can the riders choose where to go? Yes, it'll be very similar to, like I said, an Uber or Lyft app where you put in where you want to be picked up and where you want to go to.
So
go ahead.
Is the principal goal of this to solve the so-called last mile problem so that people can use transit? They can't get all the way to where they're going, so this will help them to use, get away from single-use vehicles and use transit, and then get them to that last little bit? Or is there another primary goal here?
I would say that, yeah, that is definitely one of the major goals. And again, that's why we picked the north part of the county, is that we want to get people to the high frequency, high capacity rail or high frequency, high capacity bus lines. As I said, we've had some mediocre results with fixed route up in the north part of the county. And the idea is to see, is this a better way of providing people that opportunity to get to that high frequency service?
David, and then Henry.
I understand why you chose where you chose, given the density issues. But I am curious in terms of a population, who you're targeting or who you're hoping will use this, and how might that overlap with people who might use Lyft or Uber in those areas as solutions. I see what you're trying to do, but I almost wonder, what would a pilot program look like, say, to help lower income people to maybe subsidize using Uber or Lyft or something like that. So I just love to know a little bit more about who you're targeting and how you're looking at Lyft and Uber competition.
So there's a population of people in the north, and yes, it has a lot to do with the density and land use up there. And I think the people that we're targeting are the ones that were using transit previously, to get to East Falls Church or Ballston, but also people who use a single occupancy vehicle to get to work now or to drive over to East Falls Church to park their car all day and get on the train. So that is who we're targeting. And as noted, we did add the smaller zone to the south in Westover where there is some lower income housing to help that community there. There's also a school there. We've talked about because ART does have free rides for school-aged children, the iRide program that Lauren runs. So that is another group that we are targeting, particularly not necessarily to use this to get to school, but particularly like after hours activities to get to places that they may need to go after hours.
Henry.
Yeah, that was a great presentation, and I'm excited to see the results. I'm a little curious what your anticipated use is. Are you and like what the vehicle fleet initial pilot size is going to be? Are you anticipating like a pretty, even meeting between the demand and the supply of vehicles and ride usage, or are you sort of expecting to maybe overshoot it a little bit and have more vehicles available than you may be anticipating usage, or are you anticipating not enough vehicles for the amount of demand? And along with that, is there potential for like, because Uber and Lyft, I think, have like you can get in a vehicle with multiple different people who you don't necessarily know them. You're maybe going to slightly different places. Have you guys thought about like, in the future, almost using these as like smaller buses? Like I could see a world where the main bus routes are sort of relegated to the larger road, artery, passageways, whatever you want to call them, and then sort of the last mile, as Sydney said, is these types of vehicles. And I have another question, but I'll stop there because I feel like I've already overwhelmed myself with what I said.
No, that's a great question. And that, as noted, is why the fare is so high. Right now, what we're starting with is there will be 3 vehicles. There will be 2 of the fully electric ID Buzz and 1 hybrid that has wheelchair access. It's hard to predict this. Like we can, we've run several models with this. There's a software called Remix that we've been able to set up the zones. It pulls demographics from the census and it estimates the number of riders. So we were looking at between, I think, 150 on the low end of riders per day to up to 400, something like that. But it's very hard to predict. And that is why we're being very, very cautious and starting off very, very small. Like I said, there is funding available in the grant to expand this. We do anticipate expanding as we start seeing what the demand is and, if we need to grow the fleet to keep up with that demand.
Okay, I'll stop there.
It is
Thank
really,
you.
it is really exciting. I mean, this could really be the future of transit and a real new way of getting people out of their cars.
Especially if it's zero
And-
emissions.
In your financial modeling for achieving feasibility, what's the minimum number of rides per day that you would have to have per vehicle?
It depends. I think that needs to be a discussion once we start seeing it. I think comparing it against the fixed route is a good place to start. And the way that the pricing model has been done in this, it's going to be very easy to understand what the subsidy for every rider is. So every trip that we make, we're going to know what the cost of that trip is. So if that is comparable to a fixed route, I think that this would be a very viable thing. I don't think it has to be exactly, down to where fixed route is because this is a little more flexible. And I think people would, like that. And the consideration that it is very difficult to provide fixed route in this area due to the land use.
That didn't 100% answer my question, but I know what you're struggling with. So
Right.
I'll leave
It's
it
not
sit
easy.
there.
Going back to what we were asking last week, are there benchmarking? Are there other municipalities who are doing a similar program that have answered these questions in a certain way that we can learn from, not necessarily follow, but just learn from. Are we the leading edge / cutting edge?
We are, I still think this is a relatively new, transportation model. PRTC OmniRide, down in Prince William County, I've talked to them. They have a program down there. And I asked them, well, how much is this costing you, saving any money? And the answer started out, what do you mean by save? What do you mean by success? And I think that that's one of the things that we struggle with. Are we going to base this just solely on how much the program's going to cost? How many riders do we need a day to be successful? Well, with the fleet we have, that would be one number. If we expand it and have more hours, it would be another number. So I think that as we go through this, as we get input from the community, as we see how this stacks up against fixed route, we're going to be able to answer those questions a lot easier.
That's great, and it makes a lot of sense. All right, with that, thank you so much for being with us and for sharing this with us. We're excited to see what happens. Hope you'll come back and tell us when you know.
Absolutely.
Great.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thanks. Well, I think that really, the plan was these are transportation issues that flow into Lily's transportation thing, but I didn't plan for Lily's teacher conference. So, and I think Jen is here, who's not going to be here yet. And Jenna is stuck with us until 9. Maybe I'll let Jen cut in front of you, Jenna, and go through the legislative. Welcome, Jen, and thanks for being here. But I think you were also giving another presentation and it's getting late. So over to you and thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. With me here a moment. All right, so and my apologies for not being able to join you in person tonight. I really do like to come in person whenever possible. So as I'm sure you've read, the Virginia General Assembly has introduced hundreds of pieces of legislation on climate and the environment. For the purposes of tonight's discussion, I have only selected 11, which is very hard to do, that I thought would be worth noting. But for every one that I talk about, there are countless other bills that are also of interest, and I'm sure would warrant a fulsome discussion. So, so just to sort of sum up what I've seen, many of the bills introduced in the GA related to energy focus on regulating the rapid growth of data centers. No surprise there. They emphasize accelerating the transition to clean energy through the expansion of solar and wind to a degree, and energy storage projects, alongside programs to improve energy efficiency and lower costs for residents, particularly low-income households. And then there's also an environmental justice component, which is really serving as a central theme throughout. Many of the bills aimed at reducing the disproportionate impact of pollution on disadvantaged communities. And then additionally, there are proposed utility and grid reforms which seek to ensure fair cost distribution and enhanced grid reliability, not to mention a ton of invasive plant related pieces of legislation. There's one key forestry bill that I'm going to talk about tonight, and so many more. So, and I have unfortunately have not committed them all to memory. So if you do have questions outside of this presentation, I'm happy to take them and can follow back up with Jenna with response. So, first, go ahead.
Just if you're sharing your screen, we can't.
Oh, I am? Okay. All right. Fair. let's see.
But it sounded like a great introduction, so I don't know. See what's not yet.
I'm sorry. Okay, hold on here. I have a, okay, bear with me here. One more second.
Or if you need to, email it, email it to me and I can always share it with the group after or.
Yeah, so I would love to do that. This normally works for me, so I'm not sure what the problem is. I'm going to try it one more time. Normally I could just share my screen and then it's not a problem.
You have another camera open.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. This is never quite my problem. All right, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to send this to Jenna, if that works. And I will just begin talking about the presentation, going through the presentation, and then when we, if that's okay, Jenna, is that all right?
Yep, totally fine.
Perfect. Okay. There's always if there's a will, there's a way. All right. And Jenna. All right. So odd. All right, so that was my introduction, and so want to talk through some important pieces of legislation, and Jenna, just let me know, flag me down once it's up, and we'll sync up. So the first piece I wanted to talk about was House Bill 2, which the sponsor is Delegate Mark Sickles, and it focuses on reducing heating-related costs for low-income residents through energy efficiency upgrades. Some of the highlights are, so it establishes this state policy to lower heating-related costs for low-income households where feasible and cost effective. So for Dominion, and this also applies to APCO, they must provide these upgrades to at least 30% of qualifying low-income households or 8,400 households for Dominion. So for phase 2 utilities by December 31st, 2031. And the utilities have to prioritize measures that reduce heating costs and improve indoor air quality. So the SEC is involved. They will determine if the measures are in the public's interest and may offer performance-based incentives for utilities to get it done. And utilities also have to report on their progress. So it's a positive bill. It's already passed the House, and we're looking forward to seeing how this advances. In the end, hopefully it'll help improve energy efficiency, reduce costs, and enhance living conditions for low-income residents. So that's the sort of the first section here. You know what? I sent you the older presentation, Jenna. So let me actually send you the right one. See, I think something happened when I opened up my Outlook. I have a nice updated one for everyone. So here, one more moment.
So there's a lot of excitement in the legislative world because we have such a different legislature this year and different governor. But still, I don't know the chances of some of these things passing. But I wanted everybody to get a feel for all the things. As Jen said, there are hundreds and hundreds of them. But that these things are getting real, some real discussion, if not real traction.
Right, exactly. So Jenna, hopefully you got my the updated link. That one has, so I provided a similar legislative update for Cindy and a few other people previously, but because of the movement in the House and the Senate, you have to constantly be updating and refreshing. So I want to make sure that I have the latest presentation for you all to walk through. So I just sent that link. All right, so moving on to House Bill 3. This is Delegate Levere Bowling. So this establishes an income qualified energy efficiency and weatherization task force to address barriers to energy efficiency and weatherization programs for low-income households in Virginia. So really the primary focus I mentioned is barriers. And this is like barriers to access and enrollment in energy efficiency programs. So the idea will be to develop a plan to improve coordination among the various state and federal agencies in order to deliver this program. So let me just pause here for a minute.
Sorry, Jen, I need to.
No worries.
The request access.
Yeah, I don't know, like, this is so unusual. I consider this the first time I've ever had to struggle with a presentation like this. So I think you're good now.
Okay.
Let me just do it one more time. But we're going to get rolling very soon. All right. So great concept to create the task force. And we anticipate that in this case, Dominion, APCO, and a rep from the Electric Co-ops Association will be members of the task force. There's an opportunity for us, we could send in a letter to help provide recommendations on the shape of the task force and the content. But nevertheless, we anticipate those would be the primary members of the task force. And they have to report to the SEC with their findings. They'll have to create a plan that is like a strategy to ensure that weatherization ready repairs and whole home energy efficiency retrofits are available to all eligible households by 2034. So it's a long ways out, but nevertheless, an important step in the right direction. And that's passed the House, as you can see, and it's now in the Senate. So slide 4 is HB 549. This is, the patron is Delegate Patrick Hope. And the original bill expanded local government authority to conserve or replace trees during the development site plan process, essentially, and establish higher tree canopy replacement percentages. Unfortunately, there was a substitute that passed the House that tracks with the 2025 version of a bill that Delegate Hope had put forward. And now that's referred to the State Committee on Local Government. That one does far less for Arlington. I'm not saying for the other localities, but for far less for Arlington in terms of giving us the ability to regulate tree canopy. And to put it into perspective, we ran the numbers. Well, when I say we, I mean Vince Verway did, but we ran the numbers, and if this bill passes, it would essentially give us one more tree in an R10 lot that's under a site plan process, just one tree. And what we're looking, if we're going to have any tangible impact on the amount of tree loss as as part of development, then we really need to push for something beyond just one tree in R10, because most of the tree loss is happening in our smaller lots. And so in essence, this really wouldn't affect it. So there's a lot of conversation going on to try to enhance the bill to get it to a place where it can better support Arlington's priorities. Next slide is HB, so Senate Bill 448. Senator Bagby. This increases energy storage capacity, really important to our overall renewable energy plans. It impacts APCO and Dominion for the purposes of the conversation. I'm just going to talk about Dominion. It's requiring 16,000 megawatts of short duration energy storage by 2045, including 4,000 megawatts by 2030. and then 4,000 megawatts of long duration energy storage by 2045. And if we had more time, I would like quiz the group to see if anyone remembers what's in the VCEA. But in the VCEA currently, there's a requirement that utilities develop 27 megawatts of energy storage capacity by 2035, and that includes short and long duration. So this is really sort of pushing the boundaries of the requirements just a bit, but it's important nonetheless. And should probably pause and say, this is just my personal opinion, but what I see with a lot of the bills is that they're making sort of, not all are small changes, but they're good proposed changes around the margins in a variety of different areas. So not just the key players of sort of in the energy space are proposing changes. There's other folks are getting involved, and hopefully, if even a portion of these are passed, it's going to ultimately cumulatively push us in the right direction. So that's a really positive note, and I think this is a good example of that. And there's part of this bill also I should mention is that it will create a model ordinance for localities to use to manage essentially battery storage in the locality, because there's also some safety concerns as well with these types of facilities. And so having that model ordinance would certainly help localities to advance this at the local level. Nick, go ahead.
The question here.
Yes.
Hey, Jen, it's Rob. Yeah, just thanks for the presentation so far. Just for the ones that touch on the utility requirements and targets, is there anything in the bills that mandates that they not increase rates, or does all this have to then go before the SEC and these targets then could wind up increasing electricity rates? Or is there any kind of safety valve in there that says you must meet these targets within existing rates?
Oh, so for this, for this one, they do have to establish a demonstration program to evaluate the feasibility and benefits. I am not sure, I'd have to read the bill again, if that includes some sort of like trigger. What I've seen in many of these bills is that they're going back to the SEC. A lot of them are pilot-based, right? Demonstrations to sort of test out whether it's feasible. And I imagine cost, I don't want to overpromise anything, is part of that conversation. But I'd have to look at the bill to be sure.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so moving on, so Budget Amendment 365. Hashtag 1S commits the Commonwealth to rejoin RGGI, and as a sort of a backstop, and this is just my words, there's also a SB 802 introduced by Senator Locke and Foy that essentially attempt at removing the gamemanship from RGGI in the future. And so right now, the budget amendment seems to be moving forward. I don't see any issues on SB 802, but we'll see. We'll see how it goes, because the Senate and House just crossed over. What was that, last week? I think it was last week. So so we're moving steadily ahead on RGGI from a legislative perspective. The next slide is HB 1062, Delegate Hernandez. It requires utilities launch energy upgrade programs by 27 with specific implementation plans and investments and cost recovery mechanisms. So in short, it's a pretty comprehensive bill, and it applies to both APCO and Dominion, and they have to conduct these pilot programs targeting low-income, elderly, and disabled individuals. That's how it's like framed in their service territories. And the utilities have to petition the SEC for approval by December 2026. So if this passes, we will be very closely monitoring the activities around this one. For Dominion, they have a minimum funding of $23 million for the first year, with annual increases for like inflation after that. and some other sort of triggers there. There is a cost recovery component where utilities can recover the cost of the programs. And they say using existing mechanisms, which I would imagine are like racks, like riders, or base rate adjustments. But there's a piece of this bill that talks about piloting something similar to the pay as you save program, which is essentially like a on-bill financing version, like a version of on-bill financing. And so it certainly looks promising. And considering that it passed the House now is on the Senate side, we'll just see how it goes. And actually the substitute, which is what passed, is even better. It's clearer. You've got more opportunity for engagement with sort of the public at large. Next slide is HB 921, and this was introduced by Delegate Lopez and permits large non-residential utility customers to meet their RPS requirements. Essentially, this is just retail choice for non-residential customers over 5 megawatts. And it certainly advances. My understanding is that this is really targeting like the data centers of the world, really large commercial customers of energy. But it nevertheless is moving forward. It passed the House and is now in the Senate. So that's certainly good news. There's a lot of components of the bill that are positive, particularly related to the advanced written notice, which used to be, I want to say, like 5 years, and now it's down to 18 months. And then the substitute, which had the times reversed, also now states that if you want to return, let's say you're purchasing your energy, but you want to return back to Dominion, your minimum wait time is just 12 months. And it also has the same RPS compliance requirements, which continues to get us to where we need to be, but gives the commercial energy user some flexibility in how they want to buy their energy. Next slide is HB 1444, another one from Delegate Lopez, and it establishes a Virginia Clean Energy Innovation Bank, and essentially designed to accelerate the adoption of clean energy and greenhouse gas reduction projects. And I'm sure some of you are like, wait, isn't there already a bank? Yes, there is. It is slightly different in its function, and it was funded by the former governor of about like to the tune of, say, $10 million for a very specific purpose. So it wasn't really functioning the way that a traditional, I don't even know, dare I say traditional, but like a sort of the common understanding of how a Virginia, a green bank would work. There are, in this bill, there are strict reporting requirements to the General Assembly. The bank has to develop a strategic plan every 2 years to identify underserved markets and set targets for projects and investments and emissions reductions. So there's, and then there's like a long-term investment strategy that they also have to develop. So that's certainly promising, to say the least. And again, the substitute was passed by the House, which the substitute just improved the bill and is now with the Senate.
That is exciting. And Jen, I hate to say this because we were behind where we got to, and you're already talking so fast, but if you can zip.
I have two left, and I'll go super fast. And I'm ending on a good one, or it's exciting for me. I don't know. So, all right. So second to last is another one by Delegate Lopez, where this is a transportation item, which I really thought, we should flag as well. And it authorizes public transit agencies to use basically video monitoring to to identify obstructions for buses, which of course, as we know, can really hinder on-time service and therefore our ability to get people to switch modes and all of those good things. So this is moving forward. And then the final slide is HB 395, and it consolidates a number of other people's bills into one. And this is essentially balcony solar. And so the original bill looked exactly like the bill that was passed in Utah, which is the only other state that has passed an ordinance to permit balcony solar, aka plug-in solar. And the amendments actually do exactly what we were hoping it would do, and it gives localities a little bit more authority to help support the implementation. And so we have really high hopes that this is going to pass, and then hopefully we can bring it to Arlington. So that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Jen. That would be fantastic. Right, I know the Energy Committee had a whole presentation on balcony solar just recently. We're very excited about it. So that was great. There's so much happening, and a lot of things have actually passed the House. So, any questions for Jen before we let her resume her regularly scheduled life? All right. Well, thank you so much for being here and doing that. Well, I should ask Jen, is there anything you're doing to help? You know, I don't think that C2E2 can lobby on behalf of this county. That's not. We can't speak for the county, and the county has a lobbying team that's, you know, taking positions for the county. But if there's something that we should be writing letters on as individuals or anything that you think of, we can talk offline, because there's some of these things would really make a big difference. Tree canopy, get it back on track.
Yes, and I appreciate the question and the offer, and you're spot on, right? As a commission, that you all are restricted in sort of what you can do on behalf of the county, but even though you're already doing a sort of a huge service in support of helping us advance our particular policies and ideas and programs. But as individuals, certainly there's opportunities to get engaged. Cindy, I could certainly talk to you offline. We're monitoring a number of bills. I think the tree legislation is a really good example of where, depending on how things sort of unfold in the Senate, we'll see. We'll see if we need to sort of push for Arlington, because if this is our only shot over the next 5-10 years of getting this right, we want to make sure that it pushes the needle far enough for us. Otherwise, it's like, we've lost that opportunity. So thank you.
Something is passed and it's not what we want, but they won't go back. Thank you so much, Jen. That's great. Lily, welcome. I hope your parent-teacher conference went well. Hope your son's or daughter doing well. But thank you very much for the information you sent around this afternoon. I hope people had a chance to take a look at it. I saw that Kevin did and sent a very interesting response. I hope you saw that. Lily, please, we'd love to hear about your amazing service on the Master Transportation Planning Project.
Hi guys. I apologize. I'm not there with you, but parent duty made me go to that meeting for my daughter. Which I'm happy to report she is as nerdy as I am, so we're fine. So on the transportation advisory group, I did send a note to you guys so that my intervention wouldn't take much time. But in a nutshell, things are going well, are on track. From the very large list of draft policies that we were presented at the beginning, the county actually reduced the number of policies, and our submission, I think, was well received, and it was echoed by comment from the public as well. And therefore, the first draft policy that leads or begins the listing, it's one focused on climate and on climate resilience. And we did get a new policy that directly includes as an objective green gas house reduction. and that was a win for us. But I wanted to push a little further and ask the county staff to consider in the first policy, the one that talks about climate resilience, to also include as an objective a mitigation objective or policy or consideration. And they kind of said, not necessarily, we're not, that is part of the climate action plan, is not the transportation plan. And then on the one that I referred on my email, policy 6B, they included the emission reduction objective, but I also push for consideration of including wording related to electrification of transport, because I think it's very important that that is a policy that the county considers how the planning of the transportation system is going to affect the manner in which EV infrastructure is going to be laid out. And I got pushback from the county staff. They specifically told me that this master transportation plan was about right away. It wasn't about climate. And that that they will consider this as a strategy, but not a policy. And I just let it go. And I sent my resume or summary to Cindy, and I offer to draft a letter in case we just want to reiterate the point and the reason why we consider that this is an important thing to consider, the two changes that I advocated for. Then in the Energy Committee, we had Richard come and speak about the plan for the climate action plan with the consultant. And I asked him how they were coordinating with the transportation planning group, because if what the consultant is going to, I apologize, my dog is barking. If the consultant is going to design scenarios for emission reduction that include a lot of electrification, and the master transportation plan does not include that as a policy or as a driver of the system expansion, well, we're not going to meet the objective of the climate action plan. And he did say that they were coordinating, but I do think that perhaps we can send this letter or alter the content of this letter. I took the time to look at evidence that we can cite of why bringing electrification of transport with the mode shift is not necessarily mutually exclusive. It's actually very complementary. And but I offer the letter to you guys to read and opine on whether we should send there or not send there, or find another way to communicate our concerns.
Thank you very much, Lily. I think the letter looked great, and I see a lot of nodding. I was going to say I'm not sure people had time to read it since it just went around this afternoon, but actually everybody's saying the letter looks great. So
It has examples from other communities. which
great,
is awesome.
yeah, we love the part about examples from other communities. And Lily, before when you were the first presentation we had tonight, which was about EV charging, we asked Steve Burr from the Air Team if he was coordinating with this master transportation planning as well, and he said he was. So we are hearing that, and Rich is on the phone as well, who was saying for the climate action plan. So, but I think even though staff is probably working and pushing, that we should add our voices to that. So should we vote on this letter?
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Didn't get all this.
Guide me either.
Excuse me, but in the comments, there was identification of staff pushback on what they felt should be separate. Could you go into that just a little bit more, and maybe we could understand how we think we have to strategize to counter that argument?
So Lily,
If the letter does that enough.
can you say a little about why staff, could you hear that question? Yeah, why staff, transportation staff is concerned.
So the concern is that their mandate, or as I understood it, it's to look at the right of way. That's what they are trying to define, and not necessarily issues of climate or energy. And they told me that other plans, including the climate action plan, were gonna take care of that, but that they're not including these as a policy didn't mean that they were not going to consider a strategy under one of the policies. And I got back to them. I actually was insistent, and I said that the issue was that a strategy could simply be disposed, whereas a policy had driving force because it creates a rule, and that if we were not clear about the importance of transport electrification and the fact that the system needed to be planned with the idea that that infrastructure needed to find a place even in public spaces, in the they call it I forgot the technical term, but the spaces on the street that are not necessarily a road, but on the side that can be assigned to parking. In those spaces, you could have charging infrastructure, and you need to think about it. And they told me that the primary reason was that one, and this, from experience, from when I work with my predecessor, I understand that there is some hesitation from the county staff to kind of bring in the electrification of transport as a driving factor in their work. The reason why it's because they want to eliminate that need of smaller cars or people driving. But as Kevin said on his email to me in reply, that's never going to happen. Culturally, the United States, it's not a society in which people are not going to buy a car. And so we're not going to be able to reduce emissions unless we address the electrification of transport. And so those are the two main reasons. One was stated in the meeting, and the other one is kind of a philosophical, I don't know, stance. That's what I can tell. If you want to have more detail, there is a recording of the meeting, and you can hear my intervention, and you can hear the reply as well. I tried to summarize it as precisely and as unbiased as I could in my note.
And thank you for that. It's probably gave you a big headache. I guess I was just looking to understand if the pushback is coming from a specific angle, and they're saying we can't make policy that directly goes outside of our lines. Can they make policy that can, in the future, align better with the energy plan?
Sounds like they're saying that we're focused on transportation and the climate action plan can focus on climate, and you find a strategy that will reconcile them later. But that's not their top priority. But I totally agree with Lily that getting it into the foundational level of as many plans as we can, consistent with the climate action resolution that the board passed. But anyway, so because this letter went around late, we could put it in Google Docs and circulate it and give people a couple days to make any changes. But we could adopt it in principle here and then give people a chance to edit. Is that good? Yeah. Okay, so all in favor of adopting the letter in principle, and then I will post it. Okay. All right. Yep, that sounds great. Thank you so much for all the work you put in this. You can make a real difference. Really appreciate it. So, yeah, miss you and we'll see you. Okay, any more questions for them? All right, then over to Jenna to talk about signs quickly, because despite no matter How much? I think we're gonna have way too much time. We never do.
Yes, so, there was a, ZOCO meeting.
Go back,
so-
Dennis. So what is your
Yes.
job?
So I've moved from the air team to DES communications. And that's it. It's pretty much that. It's been the summary
Are
of
you
a
doing
couple of
something?
months.
I mean, you've been doing communications for
I've
the
been
air
doing
team.
communications and outreach and engagement for the air team. And so essentially across all departments, there is a communications team and they kind of tap that team for any sort of services. So facilities, uses a communications person, equipment bureau, solid waste. And so, stormwater team even. So it's just essentially just going to a normal structure. So I think
You have
that
a
originally AIR had maybe pulled a communications person or had a communications person for it specifically, but I'll be doing the same work now just in an official, capacity.
In a communications group.
Yes,
So do you report up to the?
to the communications, yep. So I'll
And are you
reporting
gonna be
up to
doing-
DES communications?
Full-time air work?
Yep, and tapping into other, wherever
Other
they
people
need me.
in there. Yeah, so you'll be doing other work too, and hopefully other people will be doing air work if you need help.
I think I'll still have the specificity of working on air. And so I'll be like that person on the comms team for air.
So there's nobody's replacing you on the air team. There's no extra position on the air team. So the air team is sort of down one, but it's more of a reorganization.
More of a reorganization, yeah.
Because we still have your commitment.
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, that's exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting. It's new. I like the new comms team, so getting to know my bearings.
When did this happen? Or when will it happen?
I think it happened a couple weeks ago, officially. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yes, so I will now just be, so DES comms on these agendas.
So will you be the C2E2?
I am still the C2E2 liaison.
Okay.
So, yes.
We will fight for you.
Yes.
So, good.
Thank
Okay.
you.
So back to the sign.
So with the median signs, ZOCO, which is the zoning ordinance committee, held a presentation and they essentially had brought up that there are signs that are placed in the medians of roads around Arlington. And the board had mentioned that ZOCO should bring it up to C2E2 because we care about waste, we care about, plastics just in areas that shouldn't be and sustainability. So they wanted to present this idea to us that they want to make an amendment of prohibiting all temporary signs by private parties in the public right of way. So essentially we are up to your, consideration, but they want you to consider supporting them in that they don't want waste in the middle of the roads because sometimes the private parties don't pick them up. They set them up, but then, a month later, the
Election
political
is long over
voting
and
is
they're
over.
blowing in the wind.
Exactly.
It's true.
So, yeah.
So that would include elections, all that stuff.
Yes. If it is a
Specifically
private
targeted
party.
Yeah.
At the elections. Yeah, I was surprised when I heard.
And
that
it's not a
about-
letter or anything. It's very much just an email over to ZOCO saying,
Right.
yes, C2E2, consider this and agrees, or, they have a few issues.
Concerns. Yeah, I was really surprised to hear that the board had asked for our opinion on political signs in the median strips. Because we're trying to deal with climate change, and energy, and making Arlington a virtual power plant. But so this didn't strike me as being our biggest issue. But, and I guess from a free speech perspective, it's, they could put signs somewhere in people's personal yards or whatever. I just didn't realize it was that big of a problem, but I guess I'm not pro political signs in medians. They may have any thoughts about that?
Did they say how they would enforce it?
Great question.
People come in at night, set them up and.
Right.
Yeah. that's
C2E2 will each have a block. Back out.
Great. So if we support this, we are signing up to be the volunteers that we I just see, prohibiting, I imagine that they'll bring that up in a future meeting. This was just the request to advertise, so this hasn't been the official.
So we could, that's a great question. We'd say concerns about enforcement. I am a little concerned about how people with not very much money can get their message out. Yeah.
Yeah, I am kind of in two minds about this. Okay, so I'm not going to take a position on this. So I'm on the steering committee of a major political party here in Arlington. And on the one hand, yes, it's certainly true that you can say that all these median signs are eyesores and they really bother people. On the other hand, this is one of the main ways that parties and candidates communicate to the public the fact that they're running. And it really is a way for people and candidates to get their names out and people get to know it. I know the party that I'm involved with is very diligent about picking up their signs after the election. And that is a major focus of what that party does. On the other hand, this is Virginia, and we have an election every year. And we have, primaries. This year, we're probably going to have a constitutional referendum in April. So you could say there are constantly these median signs. So it's hard for me to believe. I mean, I would just predict that ultimately this is not going to go anywhere because it's so fundamental to Arlington political culture to have median signs. Now, looking at it from a narrow perspective, climate change, energy, I guess this is environment, I can see an argument that our medians would be more beatific if we don't have all these political signs. So that's all I can say. Thanks for letting me talk.
I can raise it with the Forestry and Natural Resources Board for discussion and see kind of
That's a
what their
great
thoughts
idea.
are on it.
I bet they'll be more anti-litter.
And I will say, it's not always just political signs. I've seen like school plays advertised with the little signs, and I like those,
Right,
but
and
agree, it could be a major eyesore.
Our civic association meetings are.
Yep, and it can be open house signs, it can be special event,
Yeah.
political, non-commercial,
Yeah,
just mostly.
Really cutting away an affordable channel of communication. And then
Yeah,
they were arguing that it causes people to have car accidents because they're trying to read the signs. I really would like to see some data on that.
Exactly, that's my point. We need data on what the pollution issue is, if there is one, if they're going into the gutters or people ripping them out or whatever. And or causing accidents. I mean, you can't just come and say, we think this is a problem, will you support us in this, with like zero data? We have no information to make a recommendation or a decision on this. So but we need the data, and also, well, I'll just leave it at that. I like to see some data before making a recommendation here.
I think that moving in that direction, but understanding, for example, what the signs are made out of, are they recycled or not?
Right, well, and the do they
and-
reuse the metal stick?
How do we enforce the cleanup part, which is if
Right, which was
a
legal.
certain political party doesn't do a good job of that, do they get limited the next time?
They just get fined. I mean, any other way we enforce, right? If you put it out in a public right away, you're responsible for picking up, and you have 2 weeks till after the election or after your event to pick it up. If not, you get a fine. There's other ways to like enforce that. And I like the idea of more sustainable materials.
I mean, at the risk of sort of getting too into it, and this is a conversation I think for sort of another time, but I mean, could we say that we support it in terms of like limiting certain areas? Like, so it's not all up and down North Kirkwood Road, like, because I will say when I'm driving down North Kirkwood Road, there's like the same sign every other sign. So like, that makes me consider someone's sanity.
Just like.
Well, maybe we just say like at an intersection, like typically we can name four, I mean, again, then you get into enforcement and how do you actually police this stuff?
What
And
if we're just doing an email?
Yeah.
We just say that
More
we're
information.
neutral right now, that we're not endorsing this idea. We like, you know, if it, as it develops, we would consider it. But also we're worried about enforcement and we're worried about shutting down an affordable channel of communication that is pretty basic to Arlington culture. Which I am worried
And
about.
maybe just encouraging compostable, recyclable
Right.
signs that would be,
Fines and
ones that would be permitted.
penalties for people who don't think it
Yeah.
is. I don't know, Jen, if you're catching all this, but you and I can work on it and email back to them. Okay, so I do want to make sure that we have time for, I know I said we were taking a welcome respite from the SPRCs, but I want to talk about, and Joan is guest still here. I wanted to talk about Lecky Gardens and also Waverly Ridge, which David and Rob have been working on. And that's probably the rest of our time. So we just approved Jenna's meeting summary. Anybody all in favor? Okay, thank you for that. And I also want to mention that Jason Papacosma and Jen Fioretti, who was just with us, did a big, an hour and a half presentation on Eco Act on, you know, Rob, you listened to. It was really good. It covered sort of everything that they've been working on for the last year or two. It's really good. So I'm going to send that around, and if people want to listen to it, it's an hour and a half, so you might not want to. And I promised Jenna, I would say, you know, look at these people who are modeling such good behavior that, you know, for virtual meeting, for in-person meetings, virtual doesn't count as a quorum. But we're very glad to have you guys. But for virtual meetings, which we had last month, if we're not on camera the whole time, we are considered marked under Virginia, or marked absent. So we have to keep our cameras on. So there, I made that public service. Now, I was going to make you make, but I did it in the interest of time. So back to, and also your GBIP outreach webinar is coming up.
Yes, on Wednesday.
Yeah, but so we'll be interested to see what kind of. Okay.
Yeah, Wednesday night too.
And then Wednesday night we'll be at the climate action plan.
Right, right. The big food at the Central Library.
Yes.
Talk about
I
food
heard
and the
there's
master
about
chef.
300 plus registered. So.
Yeah, that's awesome. So a lot of stuff it is, especially for people from the public retaining. I mean, there is so much happening in Arlington. It's very exciting, I think. But anyway, so Lecky Gardens was the affordable housing. We wrote a strongly worded letter. You know, if I take you back to 1 Roslyn, the three 30-story apartment towers that we urged the board to vote against in the fall, and to no one's surprise, they approved three 30-story apartment towers, much needed housing, much needed revenue. But Lecky Gardens, so last month with Lecky Gardens, which is affordable housing, we wrote a strongly worded letter asking the board to please use its power to push them to make a much more sustainable building, and making the point, with thanks to David and Kevin among others, that affordable housing isn't affordable long-term if you don't do sustainable things that make utility costs manageable and that enable people to have EV cars and so on, because that's the way for the future. And we were also joined by Eco Action. You know, we write a letter about every project, but Eco Action, Sierra Club, and Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions don't, but they wrote a big letter about that as well. Remember, Katie was our assigned person, and then she was named Secretary of Maryland. So I wrote our letter, and then I did not stay as involved in the process as I should have. But luckily, we had these other groups do it. So to make a long story short, the board is fine. They discussed and took public testimony on Lecky Gardens on Saturday and held it over. They're going to vote on it tomorrow. But they did, in fact, push the developers to make a lot of changes. They got them to, and the board members themselves got them to increase the EV parking, got them to switch from LEED silver to Earthcraft gold. Earthcraft is a different kind of modeling specifically aimed for housing, and it was definitely stronger. Yes, there's more we could do. And there were other changes that I could remember if I could read my phone notes. Oh, to wire the roof for future solar arrays. So they really got movement. And one of the things that our 3 advocacy organizations in Arlington did, we met with the developer, and who were very polite and didn't move very much. but reached out individually to each board member, had meetings with most board members, and then those board members, I did talk to our board liaison, Susan Cunningham, well before all this, before we even sent our letter, and she said that they were aware and were gonna really work to move things. But the end result is, whereas in one Roslyn we got controlled, we writ large did get a lot of changes in Lucky Gardens. And I mean, it's not gonna be voted on until tomorrow. But after One Roslyn, we tried to think about what could we do differently. And one of the things we talked about was upgrading the standard site conditions so people can't lowball their projects as much. And we've done a lot of work on that. We included that in Lucky Gardens. I think that message has been heard. But we talked about doing a press campaign. We talked about all these, a lot of different ideas of getting the public involved, getting the community involved. So what worked here seems to have been a full court press on individual county board, all 5 individual county board members. And I'd like to ask Joan, if you wouldn't mind, Joan, to tell us what you think. Because you were definitely one of, if not the mastermind of the Lucky Gardens campaign. So how did this work?
Well, I mean, again, it was kind of a full court press of, making sure that the county board members were aware of these issues. And I think they were aware of a number of issues. There's also a big issue about a large tree that there's a big dispute in terms of whether or not it will survive, with the county arborist saying unlikely to survive, which means it won't actually meet the 35% tree canopy coverage. So there were a range of issues. I'm still, at this point, in terms of how much they're doing in terms of energy efficiency or committing to electrification, actually still remains, a little bit uncertain. One of the reasons for actually delaying the vote on the project until tomorrow and was to actually have the air team to look at the Earthcraft Gold checklist that didn't arrive into the county offices until Friday afternoon. So, that will kind of be the determinant of how much they're really doing in terms of improving energy efficiency and especially addressing the issue, I think, of electrification is kind of still kind of out there. So, it's again, I think we made progress, pointing out that, affordability had to take into account energy. And that was kind of the big thing, kind of resonated with the county board members. But it's still kind of uncertain. Again, the developer was, their sustainable. It's like, well, 20% energy efficiency improvements is great. It's comparable with what we've done in the past. So, again, how much they're actually willing to change versus, just changing. So, but again, it is progress. It does mean that they're paying attention to, what C2E2 says and what other groups in the community are saying. So, it's important to keep those voices up there and being heard.
Thank you, Joan. And Joan testified at the county board on Saturday, and she said, it made me feel really bad that Matt DeFronte, is the chair of the county board this year, said how much he would have liked to have heard from somebody on C2E2 at that hearing, but he said, but I have their letter and I read it very carefully. And so
yeah,
that's right. We do have a role. We do have a voice. We are being listened to. And, we asked the chair of the planning commission came and spoke to us here in December. And we asked her, do you really care if we come to the planning commission to testify for 3 minutes, or is it enough to have our letter? And she very strongly said, no, I really care whether you come and I can talk to you directly. And I asked Susan Cunningham the same thing. And she was very clear that, yes, I know we get your letter, but we really want to see and hear from you. So I know it's a pain to show up and testify at these meetings, but I'm just throwing that out there, that it's appreciated when we do it, and when we don't do it, it's noticed, and I feel guilty. So anyway, so those were things I wanted to talk about that, but I also wanted to talk about where we are. So the next one up is Waverly Ridge, which is a townhome development, and we've done a couple of other townhome developments recently, but Rob following up on Lily's parent-student conference, Rob had to go to his son's basketball tournament, who won and is going to regionals or states or something. So congratulations. And so David covered districts. That's great. So David covered the meeting. So David, so you went to this meeting and they had given us no sustainability data. We asked for sustainability data. We asked staff to help us get sustainability data. It was a tiny bit. And then what happened after that?
Yeah, it was interesting because the developers seemed, the approach was they were surprised that we didn't have what we needed, and they seemed surprised that that this was a big deal. So that was interesting. And I'm a newbie here. I don't know the history on all this, and it was very helpful to hear from you. We've done townhouses recently, so this.
Right, and Joe, who's in room 216 right now, did River House just in December.
Right, so it concerned me that they seemed so shocked about this, especially given the history. They shouldn't be. And it was interesting because when I started asking them questions, I said, well, are you going to have gas hookups? And they said, no. I'm like, well, that's great. Why aren't you telling us about this? So I don't have a great read on whether there's an opportunity here where they were genuinely not aware and are doing stuff that could be good, and that there are opportunities to have to use this as a pilot to advance how we deal with these, or if there's something else going on. But I think that it's important for us to proceed from the perspective that let's make it an opportunity, and if they don't, we call them out for that. But we've got nothing, and we've got a tight timeline with
Right,
because operate on that.
Because similar to, we've had this run of bad luck, similar to Katie having to resign. So Melissa resigned and had been unable to go to the first SPRC. So you got into the process like the day before the second SPRC meeting. And so you went to the second SPRC meeting. So it's time for us to be writing a letter, and we've got nothing. So the question is, what can we do? And I think writing a letter to the developer maybe, but you've sort of done that. You've raised their awareness. But we have written with the adaptive reuse projects, we've written a couple of letters recently saying, hey, part of the deal that you county board made with these is you're so thrilled about adaptive reuse where, office buildings are turned into housing, that you've said they don't have to deal with C2E2 or its ilk. And so you've made the decision, we get no information, and now you've asked us to write a letter and we have no information. This is our letter. But this is an adaptive reuse project. This is a normal project. So I don't want to send a letter that says, hey, they wouldn't give us any information, so we're failing them. So adaptive reuse, we didn't fail them. We just said, this is the deal you made and we can't really help you. But I don't want to do that here, and I don't know what we could. So we said we would brainstorm. So I will open the floor but I think writing a formal letter to the developer and copying staff, or you send it to staff and they'll send it to the developer, asking specific questions might be the only way and to actually get any information, because there's going to be like, us.
And I think either you or Rob had suggested sending them our checklist, which
right.
I think, from my perspective, I think it would be great if we sent it to all of the projects early on, so that, we're putting them on notice.
I think so too. We've said we were going to post it, and it might be on, certainly examples that are on the website, but they don't know to look.
Yeah.
So I agree with you.
And I guess my question is, part of the brainstorming is, does that checklist, are there things that do or don't apply to townhomes? Is there anything that they may be able to play gotcha on, or that we need to be thinking about strategically as part of sharing as well?
When I did a townhome development, which was, and I say stuff was a couple of years ago, they made the point that we're not going to do EV charging because each owner of each townhouse could have a different kind of EV or could not have an EV. We're going to, it will be wired. Everyone will be wired, but we're not going to put any in. And that made sense. And they also said, we've got rooftop terraces on every townhouse, and we're not going to do rooftop solar. And that, that was a reasonable call. People can do balcony solar now, so that takes off some of the pressure. So there are things that don't apply, but there are plenty of things that do.
Well, and even on rooftop solar, sorry, they at first said, well, we could wire it for that, but then they said, well, but we're not sure if it would structurally support rooftop solar. And that to me seems like, come on, I mean, you've got to design it so that it at least structurally can support it. So the option.
There are a lot of ways that can be done that might increase costs a bit. But we've gone into commercial buildings that were not originally designed for it, for the biosolar farm that had extensive flower bed and solar panels, and still worked. I think the key is keep all the things in there that may apply to the broad range of projects that we have to address, and let them say not applicable because, then there's a discussion around whether we agree with that or not.
So maybe just sending them the checklist, saying,
Yeah.
hey, we have to complete the checklist. The county board is expecting us to provide them with this completed checklist. We need the information. That wouldn't take us that long, and we'd kick off. But yeah, the plan, as I understand it, the planning commission meeting is not yet scheduled, so we have a little bit of time, like as in we have a few weeks.
I just have a more fundamental question, which is, you go to any site plan, there's like 50 documents listed in there with all these architectural, all these, everything else. And then you click on sustainability and basic energy model, and it says will be submitted at a later time. And so to me, it seems like it's on the county to say, we're not going to schedule your SPR2 until you submit the documents that are going to be reviewed at SPR2. And
they're not doing an energy model at the beginning. It doesn't matter if they do it after the building.
Because they didn't plan it. Kate would agree with that.
it's a fundamental issue. So, I mean, so I'm not sure in terms of strategy, sending something to the developer, it seems like the developer will respond when the county tells the developer, we're not going to schedule a meeting. And then they'll say, okay, well, we'll get the model done so we can go to SPR2. So are we targeting the right party here by going to the developer, or should we be telling the county not to schedule these meetings?
I think that's a great point, and I'm now going to ask Jenna, is even on the air team anymore, but some of these, it seems like the air team should have a chance to be in the SPRC process, but I know the air team is small and isn't in the SPRC process. So it all falls on, I guess, community planning, and as we're seeing, they're not as, so not to put you on the spot, but you get the general, I mean, I think we all get the general gist, that staff needs to push for it, and maybe air needs to push planning. But this idea that they just come to the meeting in which sustainability is an announced topic, and say, what? Yeah.
I think that, Jason is definitely fully aware that we are not involved with the SPRCs, but, I know that, with, Paul's work on the GBIP, it's something that we try to
I know you guys have
work on. So I think that it's just a matter of, maybe it's more pushing, but I think, Jason seems to have a good idea of where we should be in the process.
So as we do whatever we do with sending the checklist, we should loop in Jason and maybe Jen.
And probably Paul for SPRC.
Yeah. And when they do, Paul is our GBIP, Green Building Incentive Policy expert, but when buildings don't opt for that, we don't have his team, he doesn't have a hook in. We can talk offline because we need the last 2 minutes to talk about the budget, which just came out over the weekend, and I sent around yesterday. So again, I know people haven't had a chance to look at those 81 pages. And that was just the intro. The real budget will be many hundreds of pages, but the 81-page intro gave a sense of what the priorities were going to be: affordable housing, real layout. I saw some real. We've had layoffs in Arlington in recent years, but when you read the fine print, they've generally been of positions that haven't been vacant at the time. But this looked like there were some real people who are gonna lose their jobs and some real buildings that were gonna be closed. I was really shocked. See, they're closing the Barcroft Fitness Center. I don't think it's that old. I remember big like ribbon cutting for that. So I guess maybe utilization is down, but anyway, this clearly is a tight budget year. And we're gonna have to delve into that. And if there was anybody who would like to volunteer to work on the budget, I think we'll have to write a letter talking about our priorities. And I think we'll have to be really careful because I think this is gonna be a really hard year to get anything. You may remember the climate action resolution that was passed by the board last year said that one of the things that would happen would be a set of questions about climate would inform all the budget decisions. So I tried, I know Jen's not on the phone anymore, I tried to put her on the spot because the budget is clearly well into progress. Tell us what were these climate budget questions that she came up with that informed the whole budget? But she declined to speak on that. It is early. This budget just came out this weekend, and I know she can't get ahead of, you know, her boss, her team, the county manager, all of that. But this is supposed to be the year that the budget is very different because of the climate action resolution, that all decisions are supposed to be influenced by their climate impact. So what does that mean? What does that look like? How will we know when we see it? So I'm going to work on the budget, but I would love to get some support. Anybody let me know. Thank you, Henry. Sold. Okay.
Or anybody who's adept enough with AI could take the climate action plan and the budget and ask it to scrape things that would be relevant to us to be focused on, so that that gets done quickly. And then we all have it rather than trying to wait for somebody to read 250 pages of.
Wow, that would be awesome. I know we've struggled in prior years without AI, we've struggled to
Yeah.
do it and try to pick stuff out. It's hard. Joan, cell phone, it certainly has proven a lot of experience and expertise. So Joan, our member of the public.
I am not, but I may be able to
Yeah.
get some folks in my office to help me with that.
Well, that would be awesome. I think we'll see more of a draft that will come out that will be.
Sure. But it gives us as quick as possible to get up to speed on the things that we might need to be looking at.
Yeah. That's a
Let's
great
talk
idea.
offline about how I might be able to make that happen.
Okay, so. Okay, I think that was everything. Doug, unless you want to give a quick update on, in Elizabeth's absence, on what happened in Energy Committee, but I think you guys talked about balconies.
Yeah, we had a presentation on balcony solar. It's really exciting. It looks like it's going to pass here in Virginia. It's a great thing. I hope the county can do an example, and county comms can push this out and make people aware of it. Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks, Jenna, in advance. All right.
I'll also do a plug for the FNRC. They are trying to promote their notable trees program.
Oh.
So if anyone has a really big tree or a tree that's, central to your neighborhood or anywhere around Arlington that you think should be recognized by the county, the application's online, super easy. Tell your friends. So yeah, it's a cute little
What's the
program.
criteria? Just age or significant?
There's a certain size that it can be, or it can be sentimental value, or our whole neighborhood was built around this tree, something like that. The criteria is all online, but but the one criteria is that it needs to be a native plant species. No invasive species here. Do we want to recognize?
That's great. I'll definitely think about that. So one of the things I noticed in the budget, I talked last month about going to the rock and roll recycling event that the Solid Waste Bureau put on for kids, and it was great. And you could see the whole composting thing. We were talking about composting. That's why I brought it up. That the staff built the whole composting, didn't buy it. They built it, which was awesome. But I saw in the budget, one of the line items was eliminate the annual rock and roll recycling event. So as I said, I only made it to the last 10 minutes. Once I got there, I was really sorry to do it earlier. So I thought I'll just go next year. Apparently I won't go next year. So anyway, there's a lot of random stuff in that. I mean, when they're cutting the rock, they're getting very granular when they're cutting the rock and roll recycling event.
Using the
library branch was present.
I was really surprised at that. So, all right, well, lots to come. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thanks to everybody on the phone.
Everyone.